Have you ever seen someone out of the corner of your eye, or maybe heard something that you couldn't quite explain? Have you ever considered that you may have just encountered a ghost and not even known it? Many will shrug this feeling off and say, oh, it's nothing, but I'm here today to prove to you that I do think it's something and that ghosts are real. I've personally had several encounters with ghosts and talked to many people who've had their own experiences with it. And I've conducted thorough research on this topic as to the best of my ability to give you the correct information today. Now, when people tend to not believe in ghosts, they tend to jump the gun to say, oh, well, it's been scientifically proven that it's basically just something that we've all made up in our head when we say that we've encountered a ghost or seen one. But I raise the question, what if we can use science to prove that they're real? And journalist Kat Long, who's a scientific editor for popular newspaper sites like the Washington Post or the New York Times, writes about how we can use different technology to communicate with spirits and to basically essentially prove that they're real. We can use special audio recording devices to prove the existence of them, or these things known as EVPs that are commonly used by famous ghost hunters, like in the TV show Ghost Hunters. And I think a funny occurrence of people using these is by popular ghost hunter Shannon Ryan from BuzzFeed Unsolved and Watcher. They were talking with a spirit and it just all of a sudden said apple tater spaghetti. And you can kind of sometimes get funny responses or actual responses. Like, they'll answer your yes and no questions. They'll say their name. They'll tell you more about the history of the location. But Shannon Ryan later, like years later after that experience, encountered a ghost who basically said the same thing to them. And basically, my point is that certain technologies can easily be a way to prove that ghosts are real, because it gives us an entry point to communicating with them, to hearing them say things to us. And it's not even just that technology that cycles through different radio waves to hear spirits talking. There's cameras that can pick up different temperatures, or special cameras that track movement that we can't see, and turns ghosts into like funky looking stick bugs, you know? And it's just, the problem is that people use science to acknowledge the fact that ghosts aren't real, but then they just refuse to then acknowledge the fact that in a way science can still be used to prove ghosts are real. And personally, I think it's a bit hypocritical to just refuse to acknowledge it. Because, like, yes, there has been studies done to prove that it is something that we've just kind of made up in our head over time, that when we're in a creepy, dark place that we're going to assume that something is there. But it's just, what if there actually is something there? And we can use technology to prove the existence. And as stated by Mark Hartzman, who has written many books on otherworldly ideas and has won several awards for his writing, he talks about how the inventor, Thomas Edison, had heard enough about seance tables, rapping, spewing ectoplasm, Ouija boards, and other effects that mediums offered as a means of communication with the afterlife. If Edison was going to talk to the dead, it was going to be done through science. And though the spirit phone, which is what Thomas Edison was trying to invent, never came to be, I believe that it shows us easily that there is a drive to contact the afterlife through science, and that there's means to do so. Thomas Edison never finished it because he died before he could. But I mean, just imagine, like, if it could have happened, I mean, or where we'd be with the technology now. And I'm just saying that people shouldn't shut down the idea right away, and that people should acknowledge that it does seem to be like something that can actually happen. And I believe that this is just such an issue because the question itself, are ghosts real? And because there's been several times where people claim to be mediums, or they claim to see and talk to dead people, but then they're just proven wrong. And then everyone's like, oh, so then everyone who says they can see ghosts or talk to ghosts are lying right through their teeth. Like, the amount of times that it happens, it dampens the like strength that people have to say that they do these things and see these things. And honestly, I think it's just because people just haven't had their own experiences with ghosts before. And I think that's a key part to making or breaking your belief. I've had numerous experiences in my life, and so has my mother and my sister. And most of them all happened roughly in the same house. Like, there was once when I was younger, I was in the kitchen, and it was just an empty house, and a ball, like a little toy ball, was thrown at my back. And the only other person home was my grandma in a completely different room. So how did a ball hit my back? And in the same kitchen where it happened, my sister had been making lunch one day and saw a little girl peeking around the corner, and she watched her with her eyes until she like walked back and disappeared. And my sister later saw the same little girl in her room playing with like her toys and stuff like that. And I think easily seeing or hearing ghosts can decide whether or not someone believes, because I didn't believe in ghosts until I had my own experiences with them. I thought, oh, this isn't real. But how else do you explain what happens, you know? And I think people should just be more open to the possibilities and being curious about the unknown. I mean, then I guess I raised the question to you all, what happens to our energy when we die? Because I mean, in the words of Albert Einstein, he said that energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be changed from one form to another. I mean, easily, maybe our energy just gets absorbed by the earth or the universe, but what if it doesn't? You know? Like, what if we stay here after death as like a form of a spirit or a ghost? Because then that goes into people's personal beliefs about what spirits actually are and all that stuff. And so you might still not believe, and that's perfectly okay. But even at this point, if you still think ghosts aren't real, I still ask you to consider the fact that they might exist out there and that they might be like all around you. And one idea is for you to try to gather your own evidence, to maybe find a haunted location, to try to communicate or see a spirit, to get that experience, to maybe make or break your belief. And there's several places in Washington that are supposedly haunted. I mean, in the book Northwest Know-How Haunts, there's lists and lists of places, and just it gives you the rundown of it, what happens, and then I encourage you to continue doing research on your own. I mean, just in Lakewood, there's Thornwood Castle, which you can actually stay at in some of the haunted rooms and see like a woman on the balcony, or a man in the president's suite, or a little boy by the lake, or even the lake right next to Pierce College in Steilacoom is supposedly haunted. And as I just mentioned earlier, that a lot of times people don't believe until they see it for themselves. And that's what I encourage you to do, to go to these haunted locations legally, 100% legally, by the way. And that maybe just by seeing them that you might believe. And it's sometimes a bit easier than you imagine, or sometimes you just won't see anything. But that doesn't mean that they don't exist. If you're willing to try, then I encourage you to keep going, to try to get an experience, to do something to prove it if you want to be proven right or wrong. You never know. But as we learned, ghosts have been scientifically proven to not exist, but then there is a way to prove that they are scientifically real. And that we've also learned that through getting our own experience, then we can easily just believe it for ourselves or just shove those beliefs all down the drain. In the end, it's up to you. I personally believe that ghosts are real, and I hope that by listening to my speech today, that maybe your opinion has changed, or you'll go home and think to yourself, maybe that experience I had when I was younger was a ghost, and maybe I have seen them or experienced them and I just never considered them. And just to remember that while things have been proven right, there's still stuff that hasn't been proven wrong either.